इस त्योहार हो आपके परिवार में सबका शुभ लाभ।
इसीलिए यूनियन बैंक ऑफ इंडिया लाया है परिवार के हर सदस्य के लिए एक अनोखा उपहार।
निवेश कीजिए यूनियन समृद्धि में, जो सिर्फ 333 दिन में इन्वेस्टमेंट पर दे 8.15% तक का रिटर्न सुपर सीनियर सिटीजन को, 7.90% सीनियर सिटीजन को और 7.40% अदर कस्टमर्स को,
यानी समृद्धि समय से पहले। ये है यूनियन समृद्धि।
और जानकारी के लिए लॉग ऑन टू unionbankofindia.co.in और डाउनलोड द व्योम ऐप।
Welcome to Brain Lady Speaks with Julie Anderson. Julie Brain Lady Anderson is considered to be one of the nation's top experts on the brain-personality connection. She has been inspiring her audiences to fire up their brains and ignite positive changes in their relationships. And now she is here to bring that knowledge to you. The information she shares will help those who hear it to accelerate their success in life and business through the discovery of their natural gifts and maximizing their brain power. When you learn to tap into the potential of your natural gifts and the power of the brain-mind connection, there is no limit to what you can accomplish. Today and every Wednesday on Brain Lady Speaks, you'll explore the latest findings to see how they have practical application in your life. And now, get ready to join Julie Anderson on the Brain Lady Speaks radio show. Take it away, Julie.
Welcome to this interview with the amazing Dianne Kosto. We are looking forward to, I love this topic as a brain geek. I love this topic, and I'll explain why in just a minute, but I want to, of course, thank everyone who is watching right now live. If you have questions as we're talking, go ahead and type it into the comment section, and we will do our best to answer those or address those as we're going through the show. But I am going to start this right now by, if you are listening later on in the podcast world, wonderful. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and we'll get those addressed as well. So let me once again welcome Dianne Kosto to the Brain Lady Speaks show this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Julie. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Absolutely. Let me tell everybody, the listeners, the watchers, a little bit about your background. You are the CEO and founder of Symmetry Neuro-Pathway Training, which provides neurofeedback. I'm so excited to talk about this. Services and systems to individuals, families, therapeutic programs, and professionals across the USA, Canada, Mexico. With the knowledge that neurofeedback saved her son's life and restored hope for her family, Dianne is a mom on a mission to make neurofeedback technology available to individuals and families so they can avoid the trauma her family experienced as a result of her son's brain dysregulation. Look forward to hearing that story. From an early age, Dianne's son was kicked out of schools and programs. Dianne continually sought an environment that would help her son thrive, while physicians, psychologists, therapists, counselors, and educational professionals gave her advice. No one had talked to her about neurofeedback. For over 13 years, Dianne has trained and provided clinical and technical support programs and professionals who utilize neurofeedback and Symmetry Neuro-Pathway training, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And as an approved instructor for Bridgeport's College CEC and certificate course, Dianne instructed chiropractors in advanced QEEG courses. All right, so you present to various continuing education conferences across the USA. You list a bunch of these. We will have all of those in the show notes so anyone can look at those. And we're going to talk about how brainwave dysregulation, what it can look like, and then how it is oftentimes mislabeled as ADD, ADHD, brain fog, depression, those types of things, and how neurofeedback helps with that. So welcome again. Welcome again.
Thank you, Julie. I'm sorry we gave you all those tongue twisters too. That was quite a bit.
I love it. I love it because it helps everybody to know your background. I think that's important. And I really want to hear about your story, but I want to share really quick why I am so excited about this topic for the listeners. So for those of you who know me or have seen me speak, I will often say that my background started when I was studying psychoneuroimmunology, which is this big long word that just means the connection between the thoughts in your mind, the chemistry in your brain shifts, and then how that affects your immune system. And in the book Head First by Norman Cousins, I strongly suggest that as a read. It talked about neurofeedback and how it was scientifically proven to actually, how your thoughts could actually change your body chemistry. And it was just fascinating to me. So it was, this topic of neurofeedback was something that had a very pivotal change, or was changed my life at a very pivotal point and kind of sent me down the trajectory of being the brain lady, as opposed to the natural health certificate doctorate that I was going for at the time. So that's why I am so excited about this topic. Now, enough about me. Let's talk about you. Tell us a little bit, give us a little bit more background on how you got started with neurofeedback and where your interest with your family and your own personal experience into the neurofeedback world.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you read the summary of it. Really, it was all about my son. I mean, my background was not in anything in the neuro or health or brain related field. I was kind of like an accounting, economics behind the scenes kind of person, but my youngest struggled with impulsivity and was kicked out and labeled. And, I tried multiple different school environments and programs and organizations and homeschool and anything I could think of, trying to find an environment that he would find success in. And we kept getting that call. We really love him, but he's not following the program. Well, they didn't always really love him either. Because he came across as 110% boy with a bad attitude.
Yeah.
So he had his protective wall up for, making up for not being able to control his impulses and getting in trouble everywhere he went. So from when he was a really little guy, 5 years old, and all the way up to 12, going on 13, I was trying to avoid having him become one of those quote unquote troubled teens,
Yeah.
And so,
So how old is your son now?
He is now 25, soon to be 26 in September. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah. So what did it do for him?
Well, what happened was, after all of these different schools and programs, environments, he ended up in a therapeutic program, was about to get kicked out of there. And I was introduced to neurofeedback, went through the training and drove from South Carolina to nowhere, Utah, and set it up in this therapeutic program where he was. And what happened was, I started seeing him. Well, number one, he seemed to start to rest better because the dark circles under his eyes started to get a little bit lighter. Mm-hmm. He started to lighten up in his mood a little bit. He started to actually think about engaging in some of the elements of the program, where before he was refusing to do anything. He didn't really believe or understand what was happening or that it was really working, but he was going along with it because he had no other choice. And I was physically there making him do it. But in the end, it gave him this pause before reacting that he never really had since birth. So he was just able to stop, pause, and consider his responses. And before, he was just constantly reacting to his environment in like a fight or flight survival mode. And no one realized that's what it was, a fight or flight survival mode. It wasn't just him trying to be bad or just being rebellious. It was this protection mechanism in hindsight.
Right. And 20 years ago, neuroscience was still young. Right. In many ways. So a lot of these different procedures, and it was still kind of like, really, does that really work? Like it was still kind of in that woo-woo stage where only the scientists really, really, truly understood it. And you had to, as a parent, being an advocate for your child was probably a challenge at some points.
Yeah, it was amazing to me that all of those years, like I said, from about 5th grade on, this started happening. He literally was getting kicked out at these young ages, and people would just shake their head. They didn't really know what to do for him, didn't really peg him with any particular labels. And I wasn't a big fan of diagnosis and stuff, and he did come across as a smart kid with a bad attitude. So we didn't really feel sorry for him. We all kind of kept trying to fight him.
Right.
And that was
discipline it out of him.
That was the opposite of what he needed. There was a physical reason in his brain that he wasn't able to pause, So it was very interesting. And from 5th grade, 5 years old until 12 years old, that's a long time of nobody ever mentioning neurofeedback. Nobody ever mentioning, hey, why don't you get a QEEG brain map done and see what's going on in that little guy's brain? No one mentioned it. But that's what lit me up when I got there and I started seeing the results. I was like, somebody needs to share this with the parents. It should be first line of defense, not at the end of the rope when you're out of money and you're in debt and your kids, your whole family's traumatized. That shouldn't be the case. It needs to be first.
Right. I agree 100%. Looking deeper is so very important. So for the listeners that maybe aren't completely clear, because there's a lot of neuro stuff out there, lots of different neuro techniques, whether it's related to a physical piece of machinery. I use machinery as a big just kind of umbrella for utilizing something tangible, or practices or brain training, or mindfulness, things like that. Like there's a lot of neuro things out there. Help those listening and watching to understand what exactly is neurofeedback.
Right. That's a really great point, that there are even different styles and approaches of neurofeedback. But just to define neurofeedback, it's technology-driven learning for the brain. And I have used all of these years a non-invasive version of that, which it really is just using technology to measure and analyze your brainwave communication, and then giving your system some feedback on what it's doing so that the brain can learn to change. So it's technology-driven learning for the brain. And we start out these days, we put a snug cap on your head and put a little gel on there and just take readings of your brainwave communication, called brainwaves, while your eyes are closed and then while your eyes are open. And then we compare that to a normative database, find the regions that are working well and which ones are off. And then we know what your brain needs to learn in order to better regulate. And the whole goal of neurofeedback is to help the brain better regulate, not to cure, diagnose, or fix. It's just help your brain better regulate. Because when your brain is dysregulated, people don't sleep well, they may be impulsive, they may have mood regulation issues, they may have anxiety. But when the brain is functioning better and it is better regulated, people rest better, they can function better, focus, maybe stop before they make a decision or react, those kind of things. Does that help make sense of it a little bit?
I think that's excellent. Yeah, that's excellent. And there's a lot of different, I recently have received a certification as a brain health professional and went through a very deep training through Dr. Amen and his clinics. And there's so many different ways of reading the brain. But what has always been so fascinating to me is that things that we think of as just simply disciplinary behavioral activity or behavior can be oftentimes is connected to overactivity in a certain area of the brain or underactivity in a certain area of the brain.
Absolutely.
And when that happens, it's almost not the person's fault. And I don't want to go to that extent to say that, because then you're kind of blanketing all poor behavior. And I don't want to go that far. But I do want to say that in some cases, there's so much going on in the brain that if we can address that first, then the behavior is so much easier to adjust or to correct if it needs to be corrected, type thing.
Yeah, that is such a valid point and an important point. I think about what would our family dynamics be like if we each had a brain map on how and why we respond the way we do. We would have a totally different approach to interacting with each other and a much more peaceful society, because now I know in hindsight what I didn't know back then, and how my approach and the professionals that we dealt with, how their approach would be different if we were able to measure. I didn't have a brain map back then for him. So now, you can really use that information. And again, not to make excuses for anyone, because you can be empowered and you can use that information to find a better way to live and interact. But it also can point out reasons why people are frustrating the heck out of you. They're not doing it always on purpose.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's a critical point when because I do a lot of work with a lot of coaching and consulting with different, whether it's relationships, intermarriage, or with parents with kids, or corporate leaders. I tend to do a lot with corporate leaders and teams. And one of the things I'm always trying to tell them is the first thing when it comes to building a good relationship is thinking receiver, not sender. So we always send on that default. But when you're thinking about how does the person I'm interacting with need to see, feel, hear the message, experience that message, how does their brain going to process it? And making sure that if you really want to be heard, you have to deliver that message in the way that their brain's going to get it. And it's similar in what you're talking about, because you really understand what the brain is doing and what adjustments can be made. Now, on that note, how does that, like, let's say you with your son or with anyone that you're working with, because, we'll put this in there right now. I'm going to talk about how you can connect with Dianne and perhaps, investigate doing neurofeedback with her. But once you know this information, what are the techniques that you use to help individuals improve their situation, improve their sleep? Is it just through the treatments, the physical treatments with the CAP?
So that has been what I've done for these years. Now, we certainly partner with therapists, coaches, counselors, like whatever else you need. There's so much more involved in regulating your whole system and nervous system. It may be nutrition. It may be a sleep coach. It may, so there are all those other aspects. But from strictly the neurofeedback standpoint, can make a lot of headway, because when you start to better regulate the brain, all of those other modalities and techniques and stuff can be better integrated and applied. So yeah, just from the neurofeedback standpoint, what those sessions look like is either they would come in an office, but now it's more often at home training. We do unlimited use at home for like 6 weeks at a time and work with people remotely, coaching them on the process. And the software is really user-friendly. It's made to use at home. So myself and my team can see a lot more in the background, but it keeps it nice and simple for the user experience. So they'll have a couple sensors and a specialized amplifier that's plugged into a laptop. We show them where to put those sensors on. They click a few buttons, test their signals, and then they watch something that you can stream online, a podcast, a Netflix, YouTube, Hulu, anything you're interested in. And the software puts an overlay over top of it. So when their brain meets a healthy, well-regulated pattern, that's going to play a little bit brighter and louder for them. So they're going to be rewarded. When their brain is not producing a healthy, well-regulated pattern, it's going to go dimmer and quieter. And that tells the brain, I got to do something different. So just constantly communicating between their brainwave activity and that software. And the software just keeps rewarding them to do what we want to encourage. And then it's really based on a natural learning process. Think about when you learn to write with a pencil, or maybe practice a musical instrument. You're kind of rough at it and you're practicing, and then pretty soon you're doing it without thinking about it. That's the same learning process that happens through neurofeedback, which is technology-driven learning. You just repeat, and pretty soon there's a new neural pathway in the brain, so you don't have to try anymore. It's there.
I love new neural pathways. Oh, it's so interesting. So now you talked about it with your son, and this is dysregulation in his brain and how that was coming out in negative behavior. Can technology like this be used just as an overall to help with creativity or productivity or focus? Like, is that something that you've noticed it assisting in as well?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because again, I'm not a big fan of stigmas and labels and all of that. And I have never seen a perfect brain yet. And I've mapped some peak performers, business people, very successful people, Navy SEALs, and we all have some improvement that can be made. So yeah, we're all capable of continuing to learn. And there are Olympic teams using neurofeedback and professional athletes. And, it's not as mainstream and talked about as we want it to be. But yes, the answer is for sure. As long as your brain can continue to learn, you can improve those different aspects of your life.
Oh, so I have to ask, what did you notice, or can you share without, HIPAA laws interfering? Can you share what you might have noticed that was interesting about high performing brains?
Everybody's very different. So it's really interesting. There are some QEEG brain maps that show a really like kind of lower power overall, like this reduced power level in peak performers. And they wondered if it was from like, people that are just like overly productive, like constantly pushing themselves and kind of getting fatigued, or if it's a quality. I don't think they really know yet,
Yeah.
So
If maybe
I've
it's just a
seen that.
natural calmness or something.
Something. I've seen
Yeah.
that. And then I've just seen, typical peak performer maps look like a lot of other people. You don't really see this perfect image of the best kind of performer, because like I said, everybody has a little bit of something in there that they can improve on.
Yeah. Now, as my brain's just going, and I hope this is of interest to the listeners, but we talk a lot, and I talk a lot about the PFC, about the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and how very important it is to that higher thinking, understanding consequences of actions, reasoning, brainstorming, creative problem solving, or just problem solving in general. Like, this is one of the reasons why I tell my parents, that when you look at your teenager and you're like, what were you thinking? Chances are they weren't. Like, literally they weren't, because it's not completely developed to your early 20s. So it just literally is not completely wired to all the regions of the brain. Can you notice then, with the technology that you have, do you notice in individuals who have impulse issues, impulse control challenges is probably a better way to put it. Do you notice some like lack of activity in that frontal quadrant of the brain, those prefrontal cortexes of the brain?
Yeah, with impulsivity, there is a typical pattern, and I can't say that for everything, but with impulsivity, usually there is a little less resources to inhibit the brain. So our brain is naturally excitatory. It kind of wants to go wild. Think about it. When you lose your inhibition, what do? You do something you normally wouldn't do, right? Because the brain is excitatory. It wants to just kind of go wild. So when we have too much slow wave activity in that prefrontal cortex, there's not enough blood flow. There's not enough resources to inhibit and keep that brain kind of under control like it normally would. So you're more impulsive. And that is a typical pattern we have. But it's really important to note too, like you started mentioning about the prefrontal cortex and all of the other networks. So all of those networks have to communicate in balance. And we'll see these pictures of the brain and their certain primary functions and responsibilities. And that's great. And that's interesting and everything. But you have to remember, it's not just one part of the brain. There are networks. Any little kink or lack of communication or over communication in those networks can change how you function. So there's like so much to it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, because while there's one specific area that might be responsible for audible speech, the inhibiting explorative, what's the word I'm looking for? Inhibiting a lot of those curse words and things like that, that pulls in another part. So so that's, that network and understanding, okay, if I say this thing, I shouldn't say this thing because it's not a proper thing to say. It's connected. It's, it's pulling in that frontal cortex to the Broca's area, to this area, and to the emotion, all of that, and your memory circuits. It's such a complex, the brain is just amazing to me,
right?
The way that it works. So I like the fact that you're able to then see areas that where there might be low activity. So then through your processes, then you help to increase that activity through the feedback is.
Yeah. That's the whole goal, is to better regulate the brain, regardless of what is going on. Maybe it's too much slow wave activity up here in the front. Maybe it's too much communication left to right and from hemisphere to hemisphere. We see that a lot now, like hyper communication or not enough communication from the left side of the brain to the right side of the brain. And everybody's different on how that's going to affect them. But we see that a lot in that whole autism spectrum disorders.
Yeah. I was gonna ask if you see that in high anxiety disorders, where you've got just a buzz because your brain's anxious.
Yeah, we'll see some of that more sometimes in that frontal lobe for anticipatory worry. And
Mhm.
sometimes we see like some stuck tape loop kind of thing happening, like with rumination and everything, more in the back of the brain with like alpha wave activity that just is overproduced. So yeah, certain little patterns in everyone.
So it's so fascinating. I could go on talking about this forever. I'm sure some people are going, what?
Boring. We're getting in the weeds. Yeah.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the practical, what it means for individuals who are struggling with different things. What's one thing that you really wish everybody knew about all this technical stuff that we just talked about? Like, what's that practical, potentially life-saving? And when I say life-saving, I guess in some cases it could be if you're someone out there, and this would be who battles with suicidal tendencies or suicidal thoughts, dark thoughts. By the way, this would be an absolutely perfect time for me to insert in there. Please, 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 if you are watching this or you are listening to this, know that there are lots of resources out there for help. Reach out. By all means, do not keep those feelings to yourself, whether it's reaching out to your medical doctor or the suicide hotline or any of those. Please, by all means, know that there are resources out there. Reach out to us, reach out to other professionals, and know that we're here to help. And if you are, in addition to that, if you are currently under a certain type of therapy, be sure that you don't just all of a sudden stop a prescription that you're on or stop that and jump over to doing neurofeedback. Always discuss it with your primary care physician or therapist to make sure that it's, because when you're talking about the brain, very sensitive to influences. And if your brain is receiving one set of influences, you don't just want to all of a sudden drop that and jump to something else. It can have very devastating effects. So I want to throw that in there, that little disclaimer, and make sure that everybody knows that. Now, back to that question. What is the thing that you wish everybody would know? What are some of those things that it really, really can help with? Maybe some experiences of people that you've worked with, something that you want people to know about this technology and about this therapy that they may not already know.
Yeah, there's so much. That's a hard one thing to answer. I
Right.
definitely think we touched on it as far as family systems and understanding who you're dealing with at home and in the workforce is super important. I think removing the stigma and the labels and just looking at it from the fact that we all have brainwave dysregulation, and this should be in our homes, just like we're measuring our steps now and our breathing and all of the things that we measure. Neurofeedback should be in our homes, just like all of those other technologies. It's not something to be afraid of and be exclusive to only certain people that can have it. I want it to be mainstream because I know it did save my son's life. He would be one of those people that is locked up or accidentally killed themselves, if it wasn't for this. So it is critical that we have access to this for all of us. Those are a couple things that came to my mind at first.
So so I got to put you on the spot. So do you do neurofeedback?
I have, thankfully. Not that I can't afford to do more. We can always do more because the more stressors we have, the more we need it. But it really changed my life in the fact that I was hit with an autoimmune disease at age 19. And in hindsight, we realized I really didn't have a good sleep cycle most of my life. And once I got past those teenage years and my body wasn't repairing itself from all the growth hormone that you have as a kid, I tanked and I was considered disabled. But with the help of neurofeedback over these last few years, I really can get into a more restorative sleep cycle so that when I do activity during the day, my body's healing itself more. So it was life-changing for me as well. I've seen, like you mentioned, suicidal ideation and things like that. One of the main interesting clients that was at the therapeutic program where I first brought the technology there and I was helping my son, she was signed up as well. And she was bulimic. She was on staff watch. She was kind of antisocial, just really, we were very concerned about her. And her parents enrolled her in the neurofeedback. So we started watching. Pretty soon she was off staff watch. Somebody wasn't having to follow her to the bathroom anymore. She was keeping her food down. She started interacting a little more with her peers. Over time, she was on the leadership team. And then she got to the end of it was only a 20-session plan at that point, but she kept saying, no change, no change. She was self-reporting, but we're watching her,
Right.
observing the change.
Mhm.
And by the end of 20, I'm like, okay, finally, you don't have to come back in here. And she begged her parents for another round because she was feeling better. It changed her life. It was kind of cute. So we do have those people that don't notice it or don't want to report it, that we see some interesting positive changes with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a
that's,
lot of good stories like that. Some of them are
yeah.
in the book.
Oh, that's so amazing. Oh, the book. We're going to talk about the book in just a minute. That's absolutely amazing. I think it's great that we're having, because you'd mentioned you can do this at home. You can have it so it's not as complicated as it was in the early days, so that's exciting. I'm going to have to look into this more. And you hit on sleep, and anybody who knows me, you will know when I talk about brain health, when I talk about business health, and relationship health, I always, when I work with any of my clients, the first thing I harp on is sleep. I'm like, if
Yeah,
you're
that's
not
smart.
getting,
Mhm.
if you're not getting good sleep, every single thing in your life is going to suffer. I mean, just think about it. If you wake up with brain fog, or you wake up and you haven't had a good night's sleep, you are a grumpy butt. And if you are a grumpy butt, you are mean to the people in your relationships. You are not able to get your work done or pick up the sales, make those sales calls or whatever it is. And then you're down on yourself. So your mind health goes down. So to me, sleep, not only for the reparative, obviously for the reparative benefits of it for the body, how important it is for the brain. That's when your brain does its detox. Like
Absolutely.
it's so important. So put technology away. I harp on this all the time. Put it away an hour before you're going to go to sleep. Let your brain naturally start to fall asleep and wind down, and don't have lights right up close to you. Get good sleep. That's number one. That's number one.
You're so right with that. And your cognition declines as well. If you're sleepy, the kids can't focus in school and perform well on tests, and people don't do their work as well. And then your mood regulation suffers. So you've hit on all of it. And that's one of the first things we like to watch for and track is more restorative sleep, because there are people that don't even realize they're not getting good restorative sleep. They think because they hit the pillow within 2 minutes, they're out. That's a good thing. That
doesn't mean their brain waves are replaced.
And I'll tell you, when I travel and I present at conferences and different things, and my sleep cycle gets disrupted from all of that, I'll do a few neurofeedback sessions to try to get myself right back into that routine. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do a lot of travel for speaking as well. And I always make sure I will take an extra day if I have to get in there early enough to be able to make sure I'm wound down enough so that I can sleep well, because I want to give my all when, as do most of us, want to give your all. And if you can, in order to give your all, you gotta do that self-care. Number one, get good sleep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Enough about sleep. You do have a book coming out. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Yes. So it's meant to be a guide for parents under stress looking for help for their kiddos, just like what I went through. It's not going to be a real deep read and cause you more stress. It's really just a quick read that shares our story and what we went through, some of the things that we saw and that you can learn from, and consider neurofeedback. It goes into a little primer on neurofeedback and why it can help others. So I hope that it inspires and helps parents to find those resources and inspire professionals to actually provide it, because we will teach professionals and put it in schools and do whatever I have to do to get it out there. I don't want to be the only provider. We want to help providers provide, because it needs to be mainstream. Therefore, we need many more people helping families have access.
I love it. Quick question. How does it help with pain management? Curious.
If the pain has been addressed, like if it is more of a neurological residual chronic pain, usually yes, or phantom pain, things like that is from, it's the wound has healed, but the pain is still there neurologically, then it often responds well. And again, pain and sleep, they're tied together. I learned that too,
everything.
because my pain levels are much less than they were when I was in my 20s because of
Yeah.
it's tied together. So I always
Huge.
encourage helping with that. And it starts to sound ridiculous. Oh, this can help with this. It can help with that. Is it a snake oil? It's not. But we all have the brain. That's the common
Yeah.
factor. And when your brain
Yeah.
is not regulated, stuff happens and life is harder.
Yeah.
So
And there's just so many things in our day-to-day life. Stress alone is going to dysregulate your brain.
yeah.
So there's so many things that you may think you have it regulated today, but the slightest upset, biological factors can dysregulate the brain.
Right.
Not enough hydration, not enough water can dysregulate the brain. So there's so many different things that can knock it off. You may have it in line today, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to get knocked off fast. All right. So the book sounds, when is that coming out again?
September 9th, 9/9, my kiddo's birthday.
Oh,
He'll be
how
26.
precious.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And your website is Symmetry Neuro, NEUROPT.com. And you have different programs. You have a 6-week unlimited neurofeedback sessions. If somebody wants that, they can reach out to you. They can reach you at Dianne. So for those of you listening, DIANNE at Symmetry Neuropt.com. And stay connected with her. She's all over the place. She's Facebook, she's LinkedIn, she's YouTube, she's Pinterest, and she's Instagram. I'm not going to read them all off to you because it would be very confusing, but we will put them all in the show notes, in the show description. And you can, that way, how to reach Dianne and find out more information. So thank you so much, Dianne, for being on the Brain Lady Speaks live broadcast and podcast as it comes out later today. I was honored to have you here, and what a fun conversation. I hope it was fun for other people as well.
Well, I certainly enjoyed it too, Julie. I'm sure we could talk for a few more hours about it. So thank you for having me, and be happy to join you again if you'd like.
I would love that. Lots of things we could talk about. Would love it, would love it, would love it. And everyone listening or watching, thank you so much. We're honored that you spent the time with us. If you have questions for us, if you have comments for us, by all means, put them in the comment section of the videos or the podcast. This is I really feel these topics are very valuable. So I'm going to ask a favor. I'm just going to come right out, and I am going to ask that you give us some social media love, right? Give us some thumbs up, share these links if it's something that you think someone out there needs to hear or would benefit from, or you enjoyed the conversation and you want others to enjoy it too. I'm going to make that little request. So do that for us. Other than that, stay in contact with us. The Brain Lady Speaks show comes out, or you can stay in contact with us on the YouTube channel for Brain Lady Julie. BrainLadySpeaker.com is my main website for that. You can also reach out to us, info@brainladyspeaker.com, if you would like any information, or if there's a topic you would like to see discussed, or if you want to see this topic discussed again with Dianne, send us an email, info@brainladyspeaker.com, and we'll respond. We absolutely will respond. I promise. All right. And as I like to close all of my podcast, all of my video casts, I want everybody to just kind of roll your shoulders back. Take a really nice deep breath. Go out there and simply enjoy every moment. Thank you for being with us.